The sky above Earth shimmered as thousands of unknown vessels emerged from the darkness of space. The Galactic Dominion had arrived. Their fleet stretched across the void, massive warships casting ominous shadows over the moon. Each ship was a floating fortress, bristling with weapons capable of reducing planets to dust. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled the stars, conquering civilizations with swift and merciless force. They had encountered resistance before, but none had ever survived their wrath. Now their eyes were set on Earth, the last defiant world in a galaxy that had long since bowed before them. The Dominion's Supreme Admiral, Exal Torin, watched the blue planet through the viewport of his flagship, Tyrant's Will. He had seen worlds tremble at the sight of their fleet, leaders begging for mercy, entire species vanishing beneath orbital bombardments. And yet, when their ultimatum was broadcast to humanity, the response was unsettling. No panic. No desperate pleas. Just a single message sent back in flawless Dominion standard: proceed if you dare. It was not a surrender. It was not a threat. It was an invitation, and it made him uneasy. The Dominion's fleet moved into formation, positioning their dreadnoughts for planetary assault, while destroyers formed a defensive perimeter. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's, their weapons capable of shattering moons. In the Admiral's mind, Earth's defenses would crumble within hours. Yet something felt off. The system was too quiet. No emergency transmissions. No attempts at diplomacy. No sign of a defensive fleet rushing to intercept them. It was as if humanity had simply accepted its fate. But deep down, Zaltorin knew better. As the Dominion's capital ships closed in, their long-range scanners picked up strange readings from the asteroid belt near Mars. Pockets of electromagnetic interference. Energy signatures that flickered in and out as if something was there but unwilling to be seen. His tactical officers dismissed them as anomalies, space debris, natural fluctuations in the belt. But Exaltorin had led too many invasions to believe in coincidences. He ordered his fleet to halt, issuing a command for scout ships to investigate. The small, agile vessels moved forward, weaving through the asteroids, their sensors scanning every rock and shadow. And then, without warning, the first one disappeared. No explosion. No distress call. Just silence. A second ship followed, vanishing off their scanners in an instant. Then a third. Panic rippled through the Dominion's ranks as officers scrambled for answers. Before they could react, the asteroid belt came alive. Invisible ships flickered into existence, human warships emerging like predators from the darkness. They had been waiting. Before the Dominion fleet could reposition, the first wave of attacks struck. Kinetic rounds, traveling at near light speeds, tore through enemy hulls like paper. Explosions erupted across the formation, turning once mighty warships into flaming wreckage. The Dominion fired back, but their weapons found only empty space. The humans were moving too fast, vanishing into the void before counterstrikes could land. It was not war as the Dominion knew it. It was an ambush. A slaughter. Saltoron's mind raced. How had the humans developed stealth technology superior to their own? How had they known exactly when and where to strike? It was impossible. Every intelligence report had described humanity as a young, reckless species, centuries behind in warfare. But the reality unfolding before him told a different story. Humanity had not been caught off guard. They had been waiting, watching, preparing for this very moment. The Dominion's fleet attempted to regroup, but chaos had already taken hold. Their formations were broken, their commanders struggling to maintain order. More human warships appeared, this time from the far side of Mars, their weapons locking onto the largest Dominion vessels. Missiles laced with advanced AI evaded enemy point defenses, slamming into reactors and fuel reserves with devastating precision. Massive Dominion dreadnoughts, symbols of their empire's power, were torn apart in minutes. What should have been a one-sided invasion had turned into a nightmare. And then, in the heart of the destruction, came the message. A transmission, sent directly to the Dominion's flagship, bypassing all encryption and security firewalls with eerie ease. It was a simple phrase, spoken in perfect, unshaken standard. You thought your fleet would scare us. We just smiled. A chill ran through Exaltoran. He had seen countless civilizations break at the sight of Dominion warships. But humanity had responded with a smile. Not fear. Not surrender. A smile. And that was far more terrifying than any weapon he had ever encountered. The battlefield was a graveyard of burning wreckage. Dominion warships, once symbols of terror and absolute power, floated lifelessly in the void, their hulls torn apart by unseen forces. Supreme Admiral Exaltoran clenched his mandibles as he stared at the destruction from the Bridge of Tyrant's Will, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned the tide of battle in mere minutes, reducing entire squadrons to twisted metal before vanishing back into the darkness. But the Dominion had not come this far to retreat. With cold determination, Exaltoran gave the order advance deeper into the Sol system and crush whatever resistance remained. The remaining Dominion warships reformed their ranks, the losses painful but not enough to shake their confidence. Even after the ambush, they still held overwhelming numbers. Hundreds of battleships, planetary assault carriers, and dreadnoughts continued their advance, pushing past the wreckage of their fallen. Their long-range scanners detected nothing ahead, no sign of a human fleet waiting for them. The only celestial bodies in range were the barren rock of Mars and its asteroid belt, a place that had already cost them dearly. But as they moved past it, space was eerily silent. It was a silence that clawed at the Dominion officers. Zaltoran had expected resistance, desperate human forces scrambling to hold back the inevitable. Instead, there was nothing. No transmissions. No warnings. Just the slow, steady movement of their own fleet toward Earth. The Admiral's instincts screamed at him this was wrong. He had fought too many wars to mistake confidence for carelessness. Humanity was not running. They were waiting. And he had no idea where. Then it happened. The first Dominion battleship in the formation shuddered violently before erupting into flames, its central structure splitting apart like it had been torn from the inside. Shocked officers barely had time to react before another ship suffered the same fate, then another. In seconds, 5 vessels had been reduced to drifting wrecks. But there had been no visible attack, no missile trails, no energy blasts. The Dominion fleet scrambled to detect their attackers, scanning every direction, but the void remained empty. And then came the realization the attacks were coming from beneath them. Hidden in the gravitational shadow of Mars, human warships had been lying in wait, perfectly camouflaged within the planet's magnetic field. Their weapons had been locked onto the Dominion fleet long before they even realized the threat existed. And now they struck with brutal precision. Kinetic railguns fired massive slugs at near-light speeds, the sheer force tearing through Dominion armor like it was made of paper. Advanced torpedoes, equipped with AI-controlled evasion systems, weaved through enemy defenses and detonated in the heart of critical systems. The Dominion forces struggled to return fire, but their weapons found only emptiness. The human ships were too fast, their movements erratic and unpredictable. They didn't fight like the Dominion's usual enemies, slow, methodical, and reliant on brute force. No, humanity fought like predators, striking from the shadows and disappearing before retaliation could even begin. Panic spread among the Dominion officers. Zaltoran could hear the frantic reports coming in from his fleet shields failing. Weapons offline. We can't see them. His warriors, who had once crushed civilizations with ease, were now gripped by fear. And fear led to mistakes. Several commanders, desperate to escape the slaughter, broke formation and attempted to flee. The moment they did, human warships pounced. Fighters launched from concealed carriers, swarming the fleeing vessels and cutting them down with pinpoint strikes. The Dominion's tight, disciplined ranks had turned into chaos. Zaltoran's mind raced. He had never seen anything like this. The humans were not only fighting back, they were winning. The Dominion, with all its technological superiority, had been outmaneuvered. He had assumed their primitive nature meant they lacked the ability to fight a proper space war, but he had been wrong. Humanity had spent years preparing for this moment. Their technology had not fallen behind. It had evolved in ways the Dominion had never considered. They had mastered stealth, precision warfare, and psychological manipulation. They had tricked the Dominion into believing this invasion would be easy. And now, they were dismantling them piece by piece. Desperation crept into the Admiral's voice as he barked orders. He commanded his fleet to retreat toward open space, to regroup beyond the range of the ambush. But humanity had already anticipated this. As the Dominion ships turned to escape, their sensors picked up a terrifying sight: more human warships emerging from behind Jupiter's shadow. They had never been outnumbered. They had never been at a disadvantage. Humanity had drawn them in, let them believe they had the upper hand, and now they were closing the trap. The Dominion fleet was surrounded. Zaltorin gritted his teeth as he watched his forces get torn apart. Battleships detonated like dying stars. Dreadnoughts were turned into drifting corpses, and the cries of his warriors filled the comms. The unstoppable war machine of the Dominion had met an enemy unlike any before. And for the first time in his life, Zaltorin knew the taste of fear. Then, as if to confirm his deepest dread, another message came through. No encryption. No codes. Just a simple, calm voice, human, unshaken, and laced with cold confidence. Your fleet was mighty, but not mighty enough. And with that, the ambush of Titans became a massacre. Wreckage floated through space, a silent testament to the brutal slaughter that had unfolded. The once mighty Dominion fleet, feared across the galaxy, now lay in ruins, their shattered hulls drifting lifelessly through the void. Fires still raged inside some of the broken vessels, their internal systems failing one by one, sending brief flickers of light into the endless darkness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional burst of an exploding reactor or the last static-filled transmissions of dying soldiers. The battlefield, once a stage for a glorious invasion, had become a mass grave. And the humans, unseen and untouchable, remained the reapers of destruction. Admiral Zaltorin stood rigid on the bridge of Tyrant's Will, his mind struggling to process the horror before him. Just hours ago, he had commanded a fleet powerful enough to subjugate entire civilizations. Now, all that remained were scattered survivors, broken formations, and terrified officers who no longer believed in the Dominion's invincibility. His warriors, once confident in their superiority, now spoke in hushed, fearful voices. Their enemy had not fought with reckless desperation, as the Dominion had expected. No, humanity had fought with precision. They had anticipated every move, planned every strike, and executed each attack with terrifying efficiency. This had never been a battle. It had been a carefully laid trap. The remaining Dominion warships tried to regroup, but the battlefield itself had become a death trap. Automated defense platforms, hidden within the asteroid belt, activated and targeted any ship that strayed too far. Human warships, still unseen, picked off stragglers with sniper-like accuracy, disabling engines and cutting through command decks. The once orderly formations of the Dominion were now nothing more than drifting chaos, their vessels unable to retreat, unable to advance, trapped in a nightmare they could not escape. Every attempt to send out distress signals was met with jamming fields, leaving the Dominion utterly alone. Zaltorin's officers frantically searched for an escape route, but every path led to certain death. The human fleet was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. They did not engage in direct, traditional combat like the Dominion was used to. Instead, they struck from the shadows, appearing only long enough to unleash devastation before vanishing again. They had turned the very void of space into their weapon, and the Dominion had no counter for it. One by one, their dreadnoughts were ripped apart, their legendary planetary assault carriers reduced to burning wreckage before they could deploy a single troop. For the first time in Dominion history, a full-scale invasion had been repelled, not by an empire of equal strength, but by a single species they had dismissed as insignificant. And then the true horror arrived. From the darkness beyond Jupiter, something massive emerged. At first, Zaltorin thought it was debris, a fragment of a shattered moon, perhaps. But then the scanners locked onto it, and his blood ran cold. It was a ship. No, not a ship, a monster. It dwarfed even the Dominion's largest dreadnoughts, its surface covered in thick, armor-like plating that seemed to absorb the light around it. Weapons of unknown design lined its hull, and energy signatures unlike anything the Dominion had ever encountered pulsed from within. It moved with a silent, terrifying grace, as if it was alive. And then, without warning, it spoke. A transmission cut through the Dominion's scrambled communications, its signal clear and unmistakable. The voice was calm, steady, devoid of any fear. It was human, and it carried only one message. This is your only warning. Leave now, or be erased. Zaltorn felt a chill crawl up his spine. The arrogance that had filled him at the beginning of this invasion had long since turned to dread. He had underestimated humanity, and now he faced the consequences. But surrender was not an option. The Dominion had never retreated from a battle, never bowed to an enemy, no matter how strong. Yet as he stared at the approaching behemoth, he knew this was not a battle they could win. The remaining Dominion ships, realizing the same, hesitated. Their weapons locked onto the monstrous human warship, but their commanders did not give the order to fire. Fear had paralyzed them. The Dominion, for all its conquests, had never faced an enemy that made them doubt. And then, in a final act of defiance, one of the Dominion dreadnoughts launched a full spread of torpedoes toward the human ship. It was an act of desperation, a last attempt to prove that the Dominion was not weak. The torpedoes never reached their target. Before they could even cross half the distance, the monstrous vessel reacted. Its surface pulsed with an eerie glow, and in an instant, the torpedoes disintegrated, not exploded, not intercepted, but simply ceased to exist. Whatever technology the humans had developed, it was beyond anything the Dominion could comprehend. And with that final display of power, the message became clear. Humanity was not just defending its home. It was sending a message to the entire galaxy. Zaltorn had no choice. With a heavy heart, he gave the order retreat. The Dominion fleet, what little remained of it, turned and fled, abandoning their fallen, their wreckage, their shattered pride. The mighty war machine that had conquered hundreds of worlds had been reduced to a handful of survivors, limping away in disgrace. As the Dominion ships vanished into the darkness, the human warship remained motionless, watching. It did not pursue. It did not fire upon the retreating vessels. It simply lingered, its presence alone a silent declaration humanity was no longer prey. It was the predator. And as Zaltorn's battered fleet made its way back to Dominion space, he realized the truth that would haunt him for the rest of his days. The battlefield was no longer a place of conquest. It had become a graveyard, and the Dominion had buried itself in it. The remnants of the once mighty Dominion fleet drifted through the void, battered and broken. Fires still raged in the shattered remains of countless warships, their hulks now little more than floating coffins for the millions who had perished. The battle was over, yet the silence that followed was far more terrifying than the war itself. Humanity had done what no other species had ever dared. They had shattered the illusion of Dominion invincibility. Supreme Admiral Zaltorn stood motionless on the bridge of Tyrant's Will, his eyes locked on the devastation outside. His warriors had been reduced to cowards, their fearless reputation crumbling the moment they had realized the truth. They had never stood a chance. The Dominion had entered the Sol system with confidence, believing their overwhelming numbers and superior firepower would crush humanity in mere hours. But what they had failed to understand was that humanity did not fight wars the way the Dominion expected. The fleet had been drawn into a carefully orchestrated ambush, their formations torn apart before they had even understood what was happening. Every battle had been a trap, every maneuver countered with brutal efficiency. And the humans they had fought with a cold, calculated precision that no Dominion officer could comprehend. They had not fought for honor, for territory, or for power. They had fought to survive. And there was nothing more dangerous in the galaxy than an enemy with nothing to lose. The Dominion's arrogance had been their downfall. Zaltorn had believed, as all Dominion commanders did, that the war was already won before the first shot was even fired. He had expected desperate resistance, unorganized chaos, and civilians begging for mercy. But what he had encountered instead was a species that had been preparing for this moment for decades. Humanity had not cowered. They had not begged. They had stood their ground and delivered a lesson that the Dominion would never forget. And now, as the last few Dominion warships limped away, leaving behind a battlefield littered with their fallen, Xaltorin felt something he had never felt before. Shame. His fleet was in shambles. The chain of command had collapsed. Dozens of high-ranking Dominion officials had either perished in battle or had gone silent, their fates unknown. The once organized invasion had turned into a chaotic retreat, but the nightmare was not over. Just as the remaining warships prepared to leave human space, a new signal came through a broadcast from Earth. It was not encrypted, not hidden, not disguised. It was deliberate. A final message from humanity, a statement to the Dominion and to every empire that had ever considered them weak. The screen flickered, and a human figure appeared. No medals, no decorations, no elaborate uniform, just a man, standing in front of a burning battlefield, his expression unreadable. His voice, however, carried the weight of vengeance. "This is Admiral Jonathan Pierce of the United Terran Navy. Your fleet came to our world, believing you would find an easy victory. You came with arrogance. You came with the belief that we would fall like the others before us. But you were wrong. And now, you leave with nothing but ashes and regret." Xaltorin's fists clenched as the human continued, his voice calm but laced with an unshakable confidence. "You thought yourselves untouchable. You believed your empire was beyond consequence. But now, you know the truth. We are not weak. We are not prey. And if you ever return to our space, there will be no escape, no mercy, no surrender. Only extinction." The transmission cut out, and the silence that followed was suffocating. No one on the Tyrant's will spoke. No one dared to. The message was clear: humanity was not afraid anymore. The Dominion had spent centuries ruling through fear, but now they were the ones who feared. The ones who ran. The ones who had to explain to their people why they had failed. ASC, the last of the Dominion warships, engaged their FTL drives and disappeared into the depths of space. Xaltorin took one final look at the battlefield they had left behind. It was a graveyard, a place where arrogance had met its end. The Dominion had come to conquer, but they had left defeated. And now, as the shattered fleet made its way back to Dominion space, one truth became clear. The Dominion was no longer the greatest power in the galaxy. Humanity was. Darkness stretched across the void, interrupted only by the flickering embers of broken warships. The battlefield was silent now, a cold graveyard where Dominion pride had crumbled. The once mighty invasion force had been reduced to drifting wreckage, and the few ships that survived had already fled, carrying with them the scars of defeat. But among the ruins, hidden within the shattered husk of a Dominion dreadnought, Commander Kelvorin coughed, the metallic taste of blood filling his mouth as he struggled to remain conscious. The bridge of the Doombringer was in ruins. Smoke choked the air, and broken consoles sparked as dying systems tried to function one last time. Most of his crew was dead, their bodies strewn across the floor, their lifeless eyes staring into the abyss. The battle had been lost. Humanity had won. He had not expected this. None of them had. The Dominion had entered human space with confidence, believing their war machine to be unstoppable. But what they had found instead was death, waiting patiently, hidden behind the cold, strategic genius of a species they had underestimated. Humanity had not fought with desperation, as the Dominion had predicted. They had fought with purpose, with precision, with vengeance. Kelvorin groaned, dragging himself toward the damaged communications console. The ship's power was failing, but there was still time for one last message. He had to warn them. He had to tell the Dominion what they had truly encountered. This was not just another failed conquest. This was the beginning of something far worse. Humanity had not been defending itself out of fear. It had been waiting, preparing, and now they were ready to strike back. The screen flickered, the transmission log still intact despite the damage. He knew the High Command would be listening. His name would be cursed. He would be labeled a coward, a fool, a disgrace to the Dominion. But none of it mattered anymore. The truth had to be spoken. His claws trembled as he activated the recording, his voice hoarse, laced with pain and something unfamiliar fear. This is Commander Cale Voran of the Dominion warship Doombringer. If you are receiving this message, know that our fleet is lost. We came to destroy them, to break them, to show them the power of the Dominion. But instead, we were the ones who were broken. Humanity is not what we thought. They are not weak. They are not prey. He coughed violently, blood splattering against the screen. The ship's structure groaned as another explosion rocked the hull, but he continued. There was no time left. They were waiting for us. Every move we made, they had already predicted. Every strategy, every formation, every strength we relied on, they countered them all with terrifying efficiency. We thought ourselves gods. But we were insects walking into the web of a predator far greater than anything we have ever faced. The lights flickered again. Emergency power was failing. The end was near. Cale Voran forced himself to stay focused, his breathing ragged. This was not a victory for them. It was a message. They did not just want to survive. They wanted us to know that we are no longer the dominant force in this galaxy. They wanted us to run, to tell the others, to spread their warning. And I tell you now, if we do not listen, if we do not change, then this war will not end with their defeat. He took a shuddering breath, feeling the ship give way beneath him. The deck cracked, pulling him closer to the abyss. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to say the last words he would ever speak. Humanity will not just defend. They will retaliate. They will hunt us. And they will win. This is not the end of the war. This is only the beginning. The transmission ended. The Doombringer groaned one final time before the reactor core detonated, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The last Dominion ship still remaining was now nothing more than cosmic dust, erased from existence. But Cale Voran's message had already left the ruins of the battle, traveling faster than light, heading toward the Dominion homeworld. And when it arrived, the entire Empire would hear his final words. The last transmission of a doomed fleet. A warning. A prophecy. A truth they could no longer ignore.